ba-boom. Flip-flop, up, wee-my-loo. Boppity-stoppity, romper-room. Hey, diddle-diddle-diddle, dum-diddy-doo. You-be-a-doo-be, ding-dong, knock-knock, hey, Natty-Lou. Tip-tap, pitter-pat, Granny-Cat, too. Root-a-toot, Kimble-loop-de-loo. Boppity-stoppity, romper-room. Romper-room and friends.
Look who is here. It's Wiggly Will, and he is here to have some wiggle giggles with you at your house and all of the children here. Are you all set to wiggle?
Yeah.
All right, let's see you wiggle that head and wiggle your arms and wiggle your legs. And can you wiggle right around our table, please, where we have some of the tools that we were learning about this week. We have our saw and our hammer, and we have our screwdriver, and I would like to see those arms wiggling. Let me see as you go around. Keep going around, everyone. Dean, where are your arms? They're not wiggling. And where are your hands wiggling? You know what Wiggly does if he doesn't see you wiggling? He likes to tickle right there. So keep going. Yeah, I like to tickle right in the middle. Keep going, everyone. Right there in the tummy. Come on, let's see your arms, and let's see your legs, and let's see your feet, and let's see your heads wiggle. I don't see you wiggling at your house. Wiggly might have to tickle you if you don't get moving. Come on, get moving, everyone. How about those feet? Can you wiggle your feet? And if you're not feeling well today, or you have to lie down or sit up, you can still wiggle your head. You can wiggle your arms. You can try that.
Trying to get me meow.
It's not a worm. This is Wiggly Will. He's a caterpillar. He's a caterpillar. He didn't see you wiggling. Well, you know what? Wiggly is going to have a rest now, here in his special basket. Thank you for playing with us, Wiggly. And now, can you all wiggle up here to our hill? And get nice? Oh, boy, there's no room for me. Can you move over, Sandra? Would you mind? Thank you. Well, now, we have just been wiggling to music. You know what? Can you all listen, Dean? You too? Thank you. Now, we are going to watch our friends Granny Cat and Up. You know what? We use construction tools when we are building things, but musicians use tools too when they are making music. And today, Granny Cat is going to show Up how, by using a drumstick, you can make music on a xylophone. Now, who knows what a xylophone is?
Me.
What's a xylophone?
Something that have a no, I forget.
You forget. A xylophone is a long instrument that has wooden bars of different lengths, and when you touch them, they make a different sound. Each one makes a different sound. So now, let's see if Granny Cat can teach Up how to keep the beat. Here we go.
Granny, what's with a chopstick?
Oh, this isn't a chopstick, Up. It's a drumstick. I saved it from the very first rock concert I ever went to, and I've been rocking ever since.
A drumstick? What good's a drumstick without a drum?
Oh, Up, music is everywhere.
Where? I don't see any.
You just have to make the music. Get with it. Now, follow my beat. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3.
Hey, that's kind of catchy. I can do that.
1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1.
Up. You're doing a different beat than me.
I am?
Yes, you have to follow my beat.
Oh.
Now, when I say 3, hit your xylophone. All right?
Yes, sure.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 1, 2. No.
Well, better late than never.
Oh, Up. Try one more time. 1, 2, 1, 2.
Well, I just thought I'd leave a little early for lunch.
Up. Try one more time when I count on 3.
Well, you said 3.
Oh, I give up.
Oh, don't give up, Granny. You'll get it. Now, let's try again.
All right. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Feel it in your toes.
And the tip of your nose.
Oh, that's how the music goes.
Huh, this is fun. I'm terrific. I'm keeping the beat. Keeping the beat. The beat. Keeping the beat. Just me and my body. Having some fun. We jump in the air and we love to run. I clap my hands, stomp my feet, sing and dance it down the street. Just me and my body keeping the beat.
Listen to the beat. Listen to the beat. Listen to the beat.
Keeping the beat.
Just me and my body, tapping in time. I follow the rhythm, I'm making a rhyme. I clap my hands, stomp my feet, sing and dance it down the street. Just me and my body, keeping the beat.
Listen to the beat. Listen to the beat. Listen to the beat.
Keeping the
Granny, I have one question.
What's that, up?
How do I stop this beat thing? Oh, I'm going crazy! Beat, beat, keeping the beat. Beat, beat, keeping the beat.
Well, our friend Up just learned how to keep the beat, didn't he? He sure did. And now we are going to practice keeping the beat with our own rhythm band. So why don't you get 2 spoons that you can clang together, or a pot and a spoon, or just use your hands. And here we go. Are you ready? All right, get marching. Here we go. Come on, everyone. Well, look who's coming to be the leader of our band. Paddington. Come on in, Paddington. Well, what did you bring to play? A tambourine? Well, you should come here then and be the leader of our band. Would you like to come over here? All right. And we are going to march behind Paddington. Here we go. Now let me hear your band instruments. Here we go, Paddington. Try to keep time with the music. Listen for the beat. Around in a circle we go. Right behind Paddington. Whoa! We're going to climb the hill for a bit. There we are. It sounded like follow the leader. Back down again. Now, if you don't have an instrument to play, you can use your hands, can't you, Paddington? And listen for the beat of the music. Here we go. Let's keep marching, everyone. One more time. Up the hill. Wow! Paddington would like us to watch him. Look at that. What a tambourine player. Keep going, everyone. Paddington, you're good. Have you been practicing? Have you? All right, let's see if we can play our music just as loud as we can. Let me hear how loud you can make your band. Very good. Well, Paddington, thank you for visiting with us. Will you come back again? All right, I'll take your tambourine for you. Bye-bye, Paddington. Bye-bye. Bye-bye, Paddington. Come back and see us again. Bye-bye. Bye, Paddington. And let's all put our rhythm band instruments away. Right inside the baskets, please.
Let's go see that.
Would you like to go inside the romp room school?
Yeah.
Well, can you make a line behind me again?
You've got to go through there.
We've got to go through the door. We've got to go through our secret door. And guess what? Guess what, everyone? We are going to make a band like our friends at home were making. Clapping your hands. Let me hear you clap your hands as you go through. Come with us, please. Come on through. Look who's here, everyone. It's our carpenter friend. Do you know who this is? This is Mr. Brian Schmidt. Can you
Hi,
all
boys
please
and
come and
girls.
find a place to sit at our desk? Oh, this is really nice. This is a nice surprise.
Yes.
We have been learning about carpentry all of this week and about how buildings are built. Now, you are a carpenter, and you come to us from Mr. Renovator.
Yes.
Can you tell us what a carpenter does?
Well, a carpenter works on all types of buildings, even buildings like this, and the houses that you live in. A carpenter had some part to build that building. Or he could work at home. There could be some home carpenters, too, that do little odd jobs around the house.
Now, where does a carpenter usually work? Does he work in a workshop or?
Well, there are certain carpenters that work in a workshop, and they make cabinets and desks such as this one here that we're sitting at, and the chairs. And there are other carpenters that work outside, working in the buildings and building the buildings up from the ground level up so that they're ready for you people to move into.
Did you have to go to school to be a carpenter?
Yes, there is a certain amount of school that you have to go to learn to be a carpenter. Just like you kids go to school, a carpenter has to go to school to learn the different rules that there are involved in being a carpenter. And also, you also learn a lot about being a carpenter by working with other carpenters.
That's very interesting. Does anyone have a question for our carpenter?
Not me.
David.
How do you build?
How do we build?
That's a good question.
That certainly
Big
is.
question.
We build, we are given blueprints that another person draws up, and that tells us how to build the certain buildings.
But how do you glue it on or something?
Well, you know what? We could learn right now, because Mr. Schmidt, you brought things, haven't you?
I've brought a little project that I've made, and we're going to build it together.
What are we going to build?
We're going to build a little bench, something that a carpenter uses on the job all the time. If he has to stand up and reach way up high, he uses one of these benches to stand on. And I've made this a little bit smaller.
Well, we'd like to see.
Okay?
Here, everyone can sit down right where they are. I'm just going to move aside a little bit.
We'll put that there.
Can our people help too?
Well, you can...
We can help by
glue.
watching closely,
You can
I
help
think.
and watch here. I'll put some glue on here like we use. Okay.
Everyone
And
sit
first,
back
I've
down on
brought
your
some
stools,
tools
please.
here, and I need to use my tools. This
What
is the
tools have you got?
apron that I use when I'm working. I put this apron on, and it carries my hammer for me, and my tape measure, and it carries sandpaper,
Dean,
and
would
it
you-
also carries my hammer. And I've also brought a handsaw.
Oh, boy. Now,
That's what I use on the job, too.
Mr. Schmidt, would children ever play with these tools? Or use
No,
these
that's
tools?
one thing that children shouldn't do, because it is very, very sharp.
Yes, we can see that.
That's
Very
only
sharp.
used for cutting wood.
All right.
So now I'm going to take this, we'll attach this like this. Okay, and I'll put some nails in here. Okay. And we'll add another nail down here.
The nails help to hold the two pieces of wood together.
It
don't they?
does, and the glue also helps too. The glue dries, and that's what makes it stick together.
Dean and Cynthia, would you sit back down? And
That'd be
David, thank you.
Now we'll do this side. Okay, I should put a
can we
bit more
help?
glue.
When can we help?
Well,
We could help at home, couldn't we?
Yes, you could. If your daddy or your mommy ever do something around the house, you could help them. Just like my little girl helps me sometimes with the tape measure. Would you like to look at the tape measure here?
What does that do, Mr. Schmidt?
The tape measure helps me find out
How big is it?
how long a piece of wood I need to cut to build things.
Yeah, it is long. Oh, that hurts my ears.
Yes, it's sometimes noisy. Now we're going to turn this around, move this down.
This is really interesting. Here it is, children at home. This is our finished bench. What do you think? I think it's pretty special, very nice. Do you all like it?
Yeah.
Well, we have really liked and enjoyed meeting you, Mr. Schmidt. Thank you for coming and telling us what it's like to be a carpenter, the work that you do, and showing us how a bench is made.
You're very welcome, Miss Fran and children. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you again.
Here.
Bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Can you all say goodbye?
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And now, let me see if you can all stand up nice and tall and come on over here. We were just watching how something is built. Now we are going to pretend that we are building a house. Come on over here, everyone. Do you know who is coming to pretend that he is a carpenter with us? It's Paddington Bear. Hiya, Paddington. Come on in. There he is. And he's brought his marmalade with him. Hiya, Paddington. Did you run into a stool there? Oh, that's all right. Oh, okay. Thank you, Dean. Now, do you know what we're going to do? We are going to start building our house by digging a hole. Dean, you can put the marmalade back down on the desk and let us all dig the hole that is part of our foundation. All right? Now, you at your house, you have to help us, too. This has got to be a pretty big hole. So here we go. Move that dirt. Now, do you know what the next thing is that we should do? We have got to put cement into our foundation. So shall we pour the cement? Really, a big truck would do this.
That newspapers are closing. Now, as regards whether it's bad that, sure, you've got to say that there's a certain point in time where if one chain owns too many newspapers, that's too much. I'm not certain in my own mind where that point is. In the case of Thompson's, for example, they own 40 newspapers, but 39 of them are small, relatively small newspapers in small cities that would ordinarily only be one newspaper towns.
Right at the moment, Southam's and Thompson's own nearly 50% of all the newspapers printed in this country.
Yes.
47%.
Yes.
And 88%, said he, have got a common ownership. So really, we've just got two hands on the newsprint media, newspaper media.
Well, I think that's saying too much too soon. First of all, Mr. Doyle has already explained to you. I know of no publisher, which isn't to say there hasn't been one, I know of no publisher that has ever had an owner of a chain interfere with the way he runs his paper editorially. Also, let's put another dimension on it. The Toronto
Do you
Star,
know any newspaper publishers who have interfered in the direction and editorial content of newspapers? Owners, not publishers.
Well, I've known owners of individual newspapers, yes. Very personal journalism. You had the Telegram and John Bassett.
There was nothing wrong with that.
But that was a single newspaper, and that was the publisher and owner.
He's exercising his right.
He combined his functions, and he exercised his right.
Oh, I will try it. No,
Not in the chains. I haven't seen that.
Well, I used to work for British Chain, and that was different.
but look, you wanted to get
There was a grave
formula.
danger. Let me finish this with
Yes,
the
right.
newspaper man. There was a grave danger working in chains, and still probably is, that you follow the unspoken wish of the publisher. You tend to pick up his party line as a newspaper man, a reporter, or an editorial writer.
That may be true. I've not experienced it.
You couldn't tell that from reading the Globe and Mail. I mean, our columnists, well, they're many and varied, our news reports,
Back to my
our
basic
editorial
question.
page.
Are we now at the stage, though, where the country is entitled to some stronger anti-combines legislation to prevent further consolidation?
I'm not comfortable with I haven't come up with a formula in my own mind that says, yes, this much in newspapers is too much. There's certainly, I think you've got to accept the principle that there is a point in time where if one chain owns too many newspapers, that it is too much. But the Toronto Star on Saturday sells over 800,000 newspapers. That's more than all of the newspapers Thompson puts out every day.
Listen, should newspapers be subsidized to prevent them going out of business?
Absolutely not.
Well, why do you and your colleagues accept a $27 million subsidy from the post office?
We shouldn't. I have argued with our industry organization that we should not accept that subsidy.
Paragraph of background from Richard Doyle. Why do they get this $27 million subsidy from the post office?
They get it because they lobbied for it over a long period of time. There was a period when I think the government was persuaded that to have a successful press in small towns across a large country, they needed some assistance to go the distance of delivering their paper. I don't think they need it now. I just might add a point on the question of combines. The Globe has advocated editorially consistently for some years now that the combines laws need to be revised, need to be tightened. We've not said it in the sense of newspapering, because the closer you bring it to your own image, the more you're likely to lose your objectivity.
Yeah,
And we've argued for that. We also were the first paper to argue that there should be a committee investigate the Black Wednesday events. But we said it should be a parliamentary committee.
Yeah, now you and I both go back to the old days. How old are you?
Oh, I'm now 58.
Just a mere boy. Little story I've never ever told on the air before. When I came out here as a reporter for the Vancouver Sun in 1947, I discovered that on assignments to the east, I traveled on a free rail pass from the CPR. Do you remember that?
Yes, I did the same.
And I remember, that's all gone now.
Yes, we...
Are your newspaper reporters forbidden to go on junkets?
No junkets.
No junkets?
No junkets.
Pay your own way?
Pay your own way, everything.
And I'll tell you one story. This is a confession, and if Clark Davies watching, it doesn't involve you, Clark. Don't tense up. My first political assignment in British Columbia, I was sent to the office of a Liberal Party official and given an envelope in which was my rail ticket and $20 a day expenses from the Liberal Party.
Good grief.
Did you ever know that?
Good grief, no.
Didn't happen in Toronto.
No?
Happened here. Okay, we're going to get down to some more detail. The standard of journalism, the pack journalism, the low caliber of Ottawa reporting, the lack of training, serious training by you people, of potential reporters after the break. I want to try and get a little more specific with Messrs. Megarry. Well, you're the fellow that made that dreadfully intemperate statement in Europe about Trudeau being a tyrant.
I made that statement. I didn't think it was so dreadful, though.
Oh,
That
congratulations.
was the truth.
We might make you into a newspaper man yet if you're around long enough. But do you own the... I mean, you're appointed permanently, or can you be fired by Thompson
I could
tomorrow?
be fired tomorrow.
You have a contract.
No, I don't have a contract.
You have a contract.
No.
You can be fired tomorrow.
Sure.
Well, maybe the Kent Commission will save you with a contract between you and the Minister of Justice.
I think the Kent Commission would like to get rid of both of us, quite frankly.
Well, they're counting on me becoming extinct, so.
You're good for 2 or 3 years yet. Now, Mr. Megarry, though, are you telling me that prior to the Kent Commission, or prior to Black Wednesday, I know what he said editorially, wanting an inquiry, that there was no need for a public review of newspapers in this country?
Oh, well, Mr. Doyle said it editorial. We both discussed it, and we both agreed that it needed to be done.
Do you have any recommendations in the Kent Commission that you accept?
One of the, you've mentioned the postal subsidy. We should never have been taking it. We should stop taking it. We should stop lobbying for it.
Have you told Ken Thompson that?
I've told the board of directors of the Canadian Daily Newspapers Publishers Association that, and he has representatives on it.
Do me a favor, will you tell him the next time you meet him?
Sure, I'd be glad to tell him. He won't bother him.
He would no more give that up than cut off his right hand.
Nah, you're quite wrong there. The Globe probably has, over the years, received more, because of the way we distributed the paper across the country, more benefit from that subsidy than any other single newspaper in the country.
What's positive in the Kent Commission? I tend to look on it like Richard Doyle does. You know, I just don't like interference with anybody's freedom of speech.
I find it very, very difficult to find anything really constructive in the report.
I find one recommendation which I can agree with, and that is the recommendation that if it is the intention of a proprietor to shut down a newspaper, that there be a public notice of at least 90 days. I think 90 days was the figure.
Yes, I remember that, public notice. And does it not also recommend that there be an opportunity for purchase by interested parties?
That leaves the door open to...
Could any of the newspapers have been saved on the Black Wednesday had that been done?
No.
No.
Not by my opinion.
I have to believe, no. There's been some discussion as to whether the Ottawa Journal might have been acquired by some employees. But I can tell you, I mean, I looked, I was quite familiar with the financial affairs of the Ottawa Journal before it was closed. And I think what would have happened is that if the employees had bought that newspaper, it would have closed within a few months. And then something like 500 or 600 employees would have been out of work without any severance pay.
See, there was a moment in Vancouver's newspaper history when we might have had a third newspaper, the Vancouver Times.
That's right.
Which came in as a result of the disappearance of the News Herald and whatnot. And when that little paper died, it wasn't well run, but when it died, it's still at it was offset, photo offset.
Yes, I remember.
It's still at a circulation of 44,000. And if the chains hadn't been so powerful then, somebody might have bought that and made it survive.
Yes.
Because you would agree with me that to have one newspaper town is bad.
Oh, very bad.
No question about it.
Although I don't think it's possible now with today's economics in small communities to have more than a single newspaper.
Should there be prevention of cross-ownership of radio and newspapers, or TV and newspapers, and vice versa, newspapers, radio, and TV?
I think that's also one of the points that the Commission made that needs to be seriously considered. And I have real reservations about a newspaper owner also owning a radio and a television outlet in the same city. Whether he owns it 100 miles away or 1,000 miles away, it doesn't really concern me too much. But in the same city, I have very real concerns about that, yeah.
You're only speaking for the Globe and Mail, I'm afraid.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
You can't speak for the rest of Thompson.
No, I wouldn't pretend to do that, no.
What do you... No, to you, Richard Doyle. What do you think of the standard of newspaper reporting in Canada today?
I think it's better than it was 20 years ago.
What do you do in the way of training people for newspapers today?
Most of our training programs, and we have them, are simply putting people into situations where they have to produce. We're not very good on lecturing. We don't offer advice or help unless the guy asks for it.
In-house training, in other words?
Yeah, we take in about 20 students every summer. We take some people on intern programs during the year. We do our best with them. We do our best with people who come to us with no experience or very little experience.
Do you give preference to people who've been through, said Webster, these somewhat superficial college training courses?
Oh, no, not necessarily.
Are there any good journalism or reportorial schools in the country today?
Yeah, I think Carleton has much to be said for it. The Waterloo, and certainly Ryerson.
One thing with which I agreed with the Kent Commission, because of my own age and prejudices, was that the standard of reporting out of the press gallery in Ottawa is packed journalism of a low order. Would you agree?
Well, I think there's a lot of packed journalism there, yes.
Across the country.
Some of it is of a low order.
How many bureaus does the Globe and Mail have overseas?
It has London, England, Washington, Peking, Mexico City, and we'll be opening another foreign bureau next year.
And you've got one in Vancouver too, haven't you?
That's not quite overseas. Over the mountains, not overseas.
Is not one of the scandals of the newspaper business that we take most of our, the communications business, that we take most of our foreign news through the eyes of other foreigners?
I don't find that as scandalous as the fact that most Canadian newspapers don't find out about Canada themselves.
Don't report each other to the other half?
No, there are very few bureaus operated outside of Ottawa by Canadian newspapers.
I think a bigger scandal than that is the fact that within Canada, almost all of the media is taking its news from newspapers. The Canadian press is supplying services to radio and to television, and all of that's coming from newspapers.
Well, you're actually the man who sets the top-line story in many days for the television networks, the Canadian press, broadcast news. Is that not a fact?
Well, I think our paper is. I don't take the claim of doing it myself.
No, but I mean, you're
Yeah, sure.
the man who decides the line for the Globe and Mail that night decides the major thrust of all the newspapers and television and radio
Frequently
stations
turns
across
out
the
that way.
Isn't that damnable?
It may simply be that we make good judgments. I don't know.
Oh, no, you don't always make good judgments. Is there room for another national newspaper in this country? National tabloid?
It's quite possible that there's room for a national tabloid. We were talking, by the way, earlier on about two newspaper cities, and the fact is, in spite of what Kent says, that there are in Toronto and Calgary and Edmonton, there's some very lively competition going on now between a broadsheet newspaper and a tabloid. Could very well be that there is room for a national tabloid. I don't think right now, at this stage of development, there's room for a national newspaper like the Globe and Mail, but that could change in 10 years.
When do you expect the government to act in the Kent Commission?
I expect them not to act. I hope they won't act. I would think that the feedback that they're getting now is being very, very critical. They have a lot of other priorities on their plate right now: the economy, the dollar, etc., the Constitution. I would see it slipping down their list of priorities.
Would you accept a job as editor-in-chief if you had to, or continue in the job as editor-in-chief of the Globe, if you had to sign a contract with which went up to the PRC Advisory Review Board and the Minister of Justice?
Well, I'm not going to cut myself off for the future, but I think my temptation would be to go back to writing.
Yeah. Hey, how about some phone calls? Don't often have such big noises as Megarry here. Sounds like a television star. Megarry of the Globe, eh?
Yes.
And Doyle of the
The
Globe.
hammer.
Doyle,
Yeah. No. The bookkeeper. No, he's not. He's a publisher.
Oh, no, he's not.
You are Irish.
I'm Irish.
How long ago?
I was 20 when I came to Canada, so that was 25 years ago.
And not bad for a barefoot boy. After the break, your calls. The two top men of the Globe and Mail, Megarry, publisher, and Doyle, editor-in-chief, set their face firmly against almost every aspect of the Kent Commission. Maybe they're a bit arrogant, you know. We'll see. Go ahead, please.
Hello.
That's you.
Yes, I'd like to ask the gentleman a question. If the Constitution is passed as Trudeau has it set up, equal language across the country, are they going to have to print newspapers in both languages?
Well, we won't be printing the Globe in both languages.
I beg your pardon?
They won't be
We won't be
printed-
printing the Globe in both languages.
Thank you. Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Yes, how much government feedback is there? How much influence does the government have over the content of the Globe and Mail?
Richard?
Well, they attempt to have a great deal. I don't think they do. I think the editorial position of the Globe and Mail is evidence of that.
In other words, cabinet ministers will want to meet with your
That's right.
editorial advisory
That's right.
board from time to time
Yes.
and try and sell a point to them.
Of course they do.
You make up your own minds.
That's right.
Go ahead, please.
Hello, that's me.
That's you.
Yeah. I have a comment rather than a question. I think it's unrealistic to talk about a national newspaper in a country 6,000 miles wide with the diversity there is, because there's not much identification between a West Vancouver stockbroker and a Newfoundland cod fisherman. Printing a Toronto paper in Calgary or Vancouver doesn't make a Western newspaper and doesn't present a Western point of view. Because this is quite apart from the political alienation of the West, which I think is going to exist until we get equal representation from coast to coast on the same principle as the United States Senate, where every state of the Union sends 2 senators to Washington regardless of size.
Okay, you've got a good point. You say that the Globe and Mail can't represent, really, Western Canada and its national edition. What do you say, Mr. Megarry?
Well, I think the very fact that the country is so big and diverse it is our reason for being, really, because it's true that most other countries have national newspapers. I don't think anybody's tried to do what we've tried to do against some of the odds we've had to contend with. But the fact that we're so diverse is our reason for being. We're trying to bring from one end of the country to the other the perspectives of various parts of the country. And we aren't here to present a Western point of view. We're here to bring your point of view to the East and vice versa.
You're a national newspaper.
Yes.
Does the Globe make money?
Yes.
How much?
A lot.
No, what were your profits published last
It's a private company owned by a chain, and I'm not at liberty to disclose it.
That's awful. Isn't that terrible?
I think it's dreadful.
Won't tell me how much they...
Look,
You're all for freedom of
I have
information.
to tell you that I'm uncomfortable with that, because I really do feel that newspapers should disclose, individual newspapers should
Publisher of
disclose
a
their
newspaper, you're not free to tell me how much your newspaper made last year.
Well, I'm free to tell you, but I may not have a job tomorrow. No, it's something for the chain to decide, and I would rather see...
You're the guy campaigning for freedom of information all over the place, and you won't tell me what your
I don't
paper
think
makes.
that's vital information.
No, but it's information.
We have argued editorially that there should be full disclosure in all business operations, whether they're privately or held
Agreed
or
entirely.
publicly.
Now I've lost the thread. Oh, yes, I was going to ask you a question about the commission itself. There is a provision in the commission, or a recommendation, that newspapers which expend extra money on editorial preparation of content should get tax breaks. Is there not?
Yes, there is a recommendation.
Can you either of you spell that out to me? I'm not as...
Well, the way the formula works is that they establish what the industry average is for spending on newspaper. Industry average is a % of your gross revenues.
On your editorial department?
Yeah, and if you spend more than that industry average, let's say it's 15%, if you spend 16%, then they're proposing that we'll get a tax break on that extra 1% incremental spending.
What do you think of that?
It's just another form of subsidy, and I'm opposed to it.
Do you pay?
If your only excuse for spending more money editorially is because you think you're going to get a kickback, then your motivation's all askew, and it's not going to get you
Doesn't matter a
anywhere.
damn how much you pay a guy, really, whether he's good or not, if he's a good reporter.
No, and some good reporters are very well paid.
Are your reporters well paid?
Some of our reporters are
All
very
right.
highly paid.
Okay, I'm not going to ask any names or whatnot. What would the average pay for your seasoned reporters be, and what's your top pay for a reporter?
For a reporter, well, our guild contract is something in excess of $500 for the reporter category. We have reporters who are making very close to double that amount.
1,000 a week. 4,000 a month. 50,000 a year, perhaps.
Very close to it.
Very close to that.
Yes.
Because they can go into television and make it.
That's going to cause me all kinds of trouble when
I
I go
know,
home.
that's why I asked the question.
Yes, I figured that.
But the fact remains is that don't you lose a lot of your best people to television and or radio?
We don't, in the Globe, lose a lot of them to television and radio. Our principal competition for staff comes from other newspapers and from governments.
You mean PR jobs?
Yes.
Guys that
executive assistants and what?
That's a bad thing for a newspaper man to do, but you can understand it. They go to
course.
big money, Jetstar planes, and all the perks.
The problem you run into in that kind of competition, say it's a large company, they only want one editorial person, and they'll go very high. You are having to hire a whole lot of people, and you've got to take care of standards as well as
You're just going to have to make it
special-
more attractive for the people you want
Yeah.
to keep if they're
Yeah.
good enough.
Yeah.
And we think we do that.
But you're not going to enter into endless auctions for individuals.
Because after all, as Mr. Megarry will tell me, it is business. Let's have another segment of calls with Megarry and Doyle of the Globe and Mail after the break. Wait, I'll try it out. Hold on, don't go away.
Hang on. You're cutting your segment.
Go ahead.
Rather than making it a long, involved question.
Okay, then. Oh, Jesus. Okay, hold on. When I come back to you the next time, you'll be live on the air. Just ask the one question, then I'll hang up on you. But your call comes through okay. Hold on, please.
Okay, we're going to go with...
Everybody listens to Webster, even on their boats somewhere north of Pender Island. Go ahead on your radio phone.
Yeah, other than the weekend comics, what's the point of having newspapers at all?
That's what we waited for. Thank you and goodbye.
Well, if that's how you feel, don't buy one.
Go ahead, please, from Naramata.
Page 15 of the Kent report refers to the Swedish situation enacting the broadest range of newspaper preservation measures of any country. And it goes on to say, as in Canada, it was left-wing viewpoints that tended to be underrepresented as commercialism increased its hold. I find that just an absurd statement. I would like to hear the comment back on that. Thank you.
That is an absurd statement. I would suggest that probably the left wing in Canada has had the platform pretty much to themselves. Certainly they have their share of exposure.
But it's rather strange that in a country like this there has not been one newspaper, a daily newspaper, that I can think of, which had as its editorial policy the support of a social democratic government.
I think you're probably right that there hasn't been a newspaper which has. The Toronto Star one
Toronto
year
Star
supported
yeah, 1 year.
the NDP. We have supported individuals within the NDP when we've been supporting other parties.
The Star's support of the Liberal government. The Liberal government is pretty close to Social Democratic Party, and the Star has been a fairly consistent supporter of the Liberals. So,
go ahead, please.
Yes, I would like to mention something that maybe has been missed here and that we lack in our local papers, and that is the cryptic crossword. One of the greatest things that was ever put in the newspaper, and I just want to commend the two gentlemen and the fact that that is there and hope it never leaves.
Thank you. Do you have a cryptic crossword?
We do indeed, and may long life be breathed into Mr. Richardson, who does it for us.
Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Yep.
I understand your paper is going to be printed in Vancouver here come October 1st.
Yes.
Eh?
Yes.
Are you going to have a home delivery service here?
We have a home delivery service right now. It'll be...
Comes from Toronto, though.
No, it comes from Calgary. Your paper
Calgary.
in Vancouver has been coming from Calgary for about a year now. We have a home delivery service now, and that'll be greatly expanded over the next few weeks.
Well,
do you have your own?
It's printed in Vancouver. Will that be carrying all the sports news and everything in Vancouver here?
You won't see initially a great change in the content because we're printing here.
Like say horse racing. Would they have the charts and that sort of thing in the
well,
paper?
I can tell you that there's going to be some changes in horse racing because we've had a lot of letters from readers across the country. I don't know how many of there are out there, but they're very vocal. We're going to be improving our coverage of horse racing probably in the next 3 or 4 weeks.
Yeah. Well, where would a person phone to get this paper delivered?
I've arrived without the telephone number. I'm sorry.
Look it up in the phone book. Go ahead, please. That's you. Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Yes, sir.
Yes, I think having a national newspaper is a fabulous idea. I was thinking about 15 years ago of doing the same thing myself if I had the wherewithal to do it. But I would like to see more local content from different areas across the country so that we can have some idea of what's going on in Newfoundland, in Manitoba, and get more of the local picture into the newspaper. Thank you very much.
Not a word about the Kent Commission. Nobody's complaining about Kent.
No.
In fact, your view is that nobody gives a damn.
Well, I think it's probably, I think a lot of citizens see it as a problem for newspapers to contend with. Whereas, as we were saying earlier, that's not what it's all about. If freedom of the press is affected, then individual freedoms are affected.
Of course, our freedom of the press is affected because we're under a regulatory body at the moment, which in fact I believe has a phrase in it that it's our function to work for the unity of Canada.
That's the first condition of the Broadcasting Act.
The Broadcasting Act. I'm sure
Yes.
it has not been followed in specifics in the province of Quebec in many ways, shape or form, right?
You're right.
But you have nothing, I mean, you are totally free. And I suppose there is a rationale in broadcasting being slightly restricted because we, in fact, have little subsidiary monopolies, don't we?
Yes.
We have a right to a public channel. Go ahead, please.
Mr. Doyle. Hello?
Yeah?
Yes.
Yes, in regards to your stance against the Kent Commission, I'm in total agreement with you. If they want to toughen up the monopoly, cartel, duopoly laws, that's fine. That's on the general spectrum of covering all aspects of business.
Correct.
To come along against newspapers, I'm totally opposed to it. I believe in freedom of speech to the nth degree. And we have some laws now that are going to try to curtail racism or against the Ku Klux Klan or whatever, whether one agrees with them or disagrees with them. I still believe in the freedom of speech to the nth degree.
Well, we're with you all the way on that. We're in the same bind in Ontario as you are in BC right now, with new civil rights legislation that seems to be blinkered.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, they should abolish the BC Human Rights Commission here and the civil liberties, because the fact is they infringe upon the individual.
Fair enough, but sure,
it is
I'm with you. I'm with both of you in principle, but there comes a
they want to
time.
control everything, including the newspapers.
There comes a time, Richard Doyle, and I'd like to hear you on this. I would object to seeing the Nazi Party or the Ku Klux Klan or the Marxist-Leninist whatever creating situations in the street whereby we've got to put 10,000 policemen at risk for their freedom of speech. When does that balance come that you say no parades?
Well, I think first of all, I don't want it thought that we are opposed to human rights commissions per se. I think that they're necessary. I think it's necessary to have policing and observation of how we all perform and function so that our biases, our bigotry, whatever, isn't allowed to impose on hiring practices or what have you. I think that to do that, you have to work out a system where you're not going to deny the rights of some people to preserve them for others. You've got to find out what's best for the general good. Now, I want that out of the way first. I think you have to devise legislation that can limit rights of public assembly to certain particular places at certain particular times. Just as, and I think this was a big case here not long ago, the question of where you can put a poster. I don't think all of us want to see all of our public buildings splattered with posters. And yet there should be a place where those posters, the existence of the posters should not be in contest. It's just put them in places that are sensible and accessible.
I've got to ask him another question, Roy, forgive me, because I know you've taken a very hard line on the McDonald Commission, but just a simple yes or no. Should our security services in the RCMP, and you're the man that makes the policy of the Globe and Mail, ever be allowed to break a law in the interests of national security?
If they break a law in the interests of national security, they should be required to answer for breaking that law.
Good answer. I'll steal that one from you. That's a good answer. From Prince George, go ahead, please.
Hello.
Yes.
I have a question about reporting. Can I ask you two guests here, what do you think of a reporter who said that he hesitated to ask the hard questions because the person he's interviewing might leave?
Well, he's gutless.
Well, he's got he's in most situations, he's got a better story. If the man leaves, then he can report on the fact that he left.
Mr. Webster, isn't that what you said about interviewing Mr. Shudo?
No.
No?
You got to draw him in.
Oh, I thought it was the other way around. Maybe I'm incorrect.
I knew that was.
You didn't want to ask him the hard questions, he might leave.
Oh, I've never asked him any hard questions. I've always licked his boots.
Hey, listen, one other thing.
Remind me to put Prince George on my blacklist.
Pardon?
Remind me to put Prince George on my blacklist, you fink.
I can't hear you properly.
I'm glad you can't. Go on. That's editing. It's not censorship. It's editing.
I know.
You understand that? What I choose to leave in is freedom of speech. What I choose to leave out doesn't matter. Is that not your own attitude?
Of course it is.
Go ahead, please.
Hello?
That's you. Come on, speak up.
Hello?
Yes.
Yes, I've got a question for Mr. Megarry.
Right.
Mr. Megarry,
Yes,
do you like Canada?
very much so.
You've been here how long?
Pardon?
How long have you been here now?
25 years.
And you still calling yourself an Irishman?
Mr. Webster called me an Irishman.
Oh, well, that's all right. Of course.
He's a Canadian citizen.
Very much so. I'm proud of it.
And you really like it, do you?
Very much so.
Well, you know, I'll tell you, I was born in the hellhole of the world. You know where that is?
No.
The old Park Road in Belfast.
Well, that wasn't too far from where I was born.
Oh, enough of this ethnic nonsense. Enough of this ethnic nonsense. Go ahead, please.
Mr. Megarry, I would like to know on October the 1st, when you have this Vancouver edition, whether the daily charges would be less than they are now. I find 60 cents a day rather excessive.
Well, it should be 50 cents a day, but we can't control retail prices. They will be left at 50 cents.
It'll be less than 50 cents?
It will be left at the price will not change because we're printing in Vancouver, no.
So this could possibly affect your circulation. I would also like to make a comment about quality of reporting. From my observation as a newspaper reader, the quality of reporting today is better than it has been in the past, but it never has been very good. And if Mr. Webster exhibits what he thinks is very good investigative reporting, it comes across to me as bullying. And then we have people like Mr. Fotheringham who come across as with a great art of the snide. I don't understand what is meant by the quality of reporting if these gentlemen tout what they think is good reporting for the ordinary reader.
I agree that reporting is better than it was. It's never good enough. I think if you do investigative reporting, no matter what language you do it in, how you phrase it, it's going to be regarded by some people as bullying. You are in the closets where you've not been welcomed. It's strangely enough, people say, and the more investigative reporting you do, the more respect readers and listeners are going to have for you. That's not necessarily so. Very often you're not thanked for doing what we feel is necessary, which is where we hear something is rotten or wrong to go after it.
Well, that was a good answer. Roy Megarry, publisher of the Globe and Mail, opposed in almost every way to the Kent Commission. Richard Doyle, similarly minded. My thanks to you, newspaperman, because you're not gentlemen, you're newspapermen. And I'll be back after the break with David McNee, the Commissioner of Scotland Yard. A word of explanation is necessary. When I was in London early in the summer, before the big riots, I interviewed Sir David McNee, the Commissioner of Scotland Yard. I come in rather abruptly on a reference to Operation Cobra. Cobra was the operation where, when the army moved in, the SAS moved in and killed all but one of the Iranian terrorists who occupied that building in London. With that in mind, I now want you to meet a very impressive man, Commissioner of New Scotland Yard. To many policemen throughout the world, Scotland Yard is the epitome of perfection in policing. I'm in the office of Sir David McNee, the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police Force, 24,150 strong, including a lot of women, about 3,000. Sir David McNee, I'm sure you wouldn't claim that Scotland Yard is perfect, but do you still rate as the top police force in the English-speaking, including American worlds?
Well, it's always very difficult to answer that question, Mr. Webster, because if I say yes, those watching will think I'm being very bombastic. But from across the free world, we get many visitors coming to Scotland Yard, and they look on this particular building where you are today as the mecca of policing. We're delighted that we have contributed to world policing in this way. And may I say to you, sir, I'm delighted to be interviewed this afternoon by a man from Glasgow, because that is my native city.
Now, in the Cobra operation, if I've got the right name, the Iranian, the attack on the building where the hostages were being held, was that the toughest job in cooperation with the army? Who gave the orders to put the army in there to get the people holding them hostages?
Well, to explain the setup to you in a few minutes would be very difficult, but we all have a role to play. The police, of course, do a policing job, and terrorism is crime. And initially, the crime is dealt with by the police. And it's interesting to remember that the police held that situation for 6 days before the SAS was called in. But in addition to that, the Home Secretary and the Cabinet have a role to play. And I advised the Home Secretary on the 6th day that I thought the time was right for the army to be committed, and it was on my advice, with the approval and the authority of the Home Secretary, that the army was committed.
So it then became a matter of a tiny state of war. Take the building.
Yes, and if you watched it on television, it was sudden and it was very professionally done. And what pleased me was that the hostages were all brought out safely. Sadly, some of the terrorists were killed.
Without creating alarm and despondency, are we still in an era where much of your major efforts will have to be on counter-terrorism, counter-hostage-taking?
Well, this is something that we're always alive to, Mr. Webster, and we've got to have regard in the way that we train our police officers, and in the kind of specialist groups that we have here at the Yard, how we can counter and deal with terrorism. But I would hope across the free world that people would see sense. There's no mileage in terrorism, and I would hope that rather than see an escalation of terrorism, that we might see it being reduced just a little.
You'll correct me if I'm wrong, sir. In fact...
you can bank on that.
But is it not a fact that Scotland Yard has been criticised for its, I think you called them special patrol groups, your hard men whom you throw into non-terrorist situations, but who are tough policemen indeed?
The Special Patrol Group is my mobile reserve. The officers making up the group are but ordinary police officers recruited in the same way as all the other officers who police London. They have no additional specialities at all other than they work as a team. And I would think that we have heard a lot, particularly from extremists of the left and of the right, about the role of the Special Patrol Group. They seem to be the Aunt Sallies in the middle at the moment. They're a very hard-working group, and they not only deal with public order, terrorist activity, they may be involved in the search for missing children, they may be involved in an area where there's a high incidence of crime, etc. So they're used right across the spectrum of policing, and they're very valuable to me because they're mobile. We have 200 of them, and they're on tap, if you like, if anything happens. And as Commissioner, I've got to have a mobile reserve available to me.
Forgetting any specialist groups you have, I mean, nowadays you would never send a policeman unarmed into a gun or an armed situation, would you? Like happened years ago.
No, I think we're more alive to the safety of the officer today than that we have ever been.
But no arms for every police officer in London?
Not at all. The vast majority of policemen, police officers, I better be careful.
Oh, yes.
This is the day of equal opportunity. But the vast majority of police officers who work in London are dressed as you would expect a London bobby to be dressed, and unarmed. As Sir Robert Peel decided when he founded the Metropolitan Police that it would be an unarmed police force. But we do have a few armed, those who protect embassies and consulates in London, those who protect VIPs, etc. Yes, you would expect me to have those officers armed.
Can a police force like yourselves, a democratic police force, can you cope with any repeated outbreaks, which we roughly call race riots in North America, and you've had your troubles in Brixton and elsewhere? Can you cope with that? Or is that something that the police eventually can't cope with?
Oh, no. We will still be able to cope with difficulties in the streets of London. God forbid that it should ever be otherwise. But let me say this.
Well, you know what I'm getting at.
I do know what you're getting at.
North America sees London in flames. Exaggeration, of course. But there are areas of it, and I think, my goodness, what's happening in the old country?
Well, this was a very small, depressed area of South London that you speak about. It wasn't London in flames. But let me say this. The police service in London doesn't wish confrontation with blacks or indeed any section of the community. And what I've been trying to do over the past days is to get alongside the black community and get their leaders to condemn violence and crime committed by their youngsters, because, believe me, they do commit crime and they're not above the law. And as long as I'm Commissioner, I will uphold and enforce the law in this great city of London.
Advice to other police chiefs who will see this across Canada: is visible presence and force the way to defuse a burgeoning situation?
I think that is a matter for the chief police officer at the scene at the time. I don't think it's something that I can say, yes, on each occasion you should always have 10,000 officers or 1,000 officers or 50 officers. That's a matter for the decision-making of the chief officer on the scene. But what we will try and do, we'll try and learn from Brixton and other situations that we've had in London. And if we can be of any assistance to anyone across Canada or across the free world, by all means we will. As a matter of fact, I discussed Brixton with the head of the RCMP in Paris only 2 days ago.
Commissioner Simmons.
Commissioner Simmons.
Sir, I must draw attention to the brass hammer on your desk. But you tell me the story behind the hammer.
Yeah.
Because I believe you have been on occasion called the Hammer.
That is true, and I don't know why, because I'm a very pleasant, nice man, as you can see. But I was a detective in your native city of Glasgow for many years, And after I had dealt with a section of the Glasgow underworld, one of your colleagues in journalism in Glasgow had a headline the next morning, McNee hammers the underworld. And when I came to London, the journalists again, as they do from time to time, picked out Hammer. And I got the nickname from Fleet Street, if you like, of the Hammer. I don't resent the nickname, and if it's about dealing with criminals and putting criminals behind bars, then it's a good nickname to have, Mr. Webster.
Sir David McNee, the Hammer, that's we'll use that as a diminutive, shall we?
Yes.
May I pick up the hammer?
Yes, please. As long as it's the one on the desk.
I can barely lift it. Can you see that, Grant?
Yeah.
The hammer. Thank you very much, Sir David McNee. And I trust it all goes well and smoothly. Oh, one other question. How many women on the force?
About 2,200 women at this moment of time in the force.
Are they successful as policemen?
Yes, they are very successful, and I think we have to be careful, and I think most of the women appreciate this, that we don't put them into frontline situations such as Brixton or Grunwick, where we had the picketing difficulties 4 years ago. I keep saying this, and I say it to you, sir, and you may share my view. I like my ladies to be feminine, not muscular.
Thank you, Sir David McNee, Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, the man in charge of Scotland Yard. Thank you, sir.
Nice to have you here.
An impressive man, to say the least. John Crispo of SFU is here this morning, and he's going to give us he's going to give us the goof of the week in his view, after the break. John Crispo, a visiting professor at SFU. John, I want to use your expertise in your usual polished, ebullient manner. And I've asked you, once a week if you can, to look cynically or querulously at national affairs or provincial affairs when you so wish, and give me what you regard, to my viewers, the goof of the week in the past week. Have you got a goof of the week for this week?
Well, Jack, as usual, it's hard to select. There's so many possibilities. I think the goof of the week has to be the federal government moving back into the lottery business. They made a deal with the provincial governments 2 years ago when Clark was Prime Minister, whereby they'd give the exclusive jurisdiction over lotteries to the provinces in return for a share of the spoils. And I guess the share this year is about 29 million. But they've decided, Regan announced last week, this week, however you want to look at it, that they're into the pool business. And now you can bet on the scores on sports games. And if you happen to get them all right, you're going to get a tremendous win. And they're saying it isn't a lottery. It is a lottery. I mean, what is it if it isn't a lottery? They're saying it takes skill. Well, nobody can be that skillful. People are going to be guessing. It is another form of lottery, and it's another example of the federal government welshing on a deal with the provinces. Again, just at the time when we so desperately need to work out things on a cooperative federal-provincial area in so many areas.
Let me get that clear. Are you correct when you say that when they stepped out of Loto, remember they called it
right.
Loto Canada,
right?
They said, okay, provinces, you can have the whole deal and we'll just take a cut of
We'll take a share of the action.
That's this Banana Republic gambling, which they're encouraging.
Yeah, well, let's not argue about the morality of gambling. I mean, we'll put that aside for the moment.
And the fact that they have now set up a British-type football pools, which must have forms, and I suppose the mail and all the rest of it.
Right.
Is what? A double cross?
Well, I think it's a double cross. Do you think a pool isn't a lottery? I mean, maybe you can find a text or a dictionary definition that says a pool and a lottery are different, but they're not different. They're both a high form of gambling designed to entice people to put money into the hands of the government instead of through taxes, through gambling.
As far as the man in the street is concerned, it is a straightforward lottery.
Well, you may get the odd viewer or listener who's going to say, look, it is skill. I follow all these sports leagues, and I got a good idea who's going to win and by how much, so there's an element of skill, which does not exist in a straight lottery where you just pick some numbers. Although even in the lotteries you pick numbers, that's straight guessing. But it's such a fine distinction. And if they really felt they were going to do this, why didn't they notify the provinces a couple of years ago that they really didn't want to define a lottery to include a pool?
And of course they have every power to double-cross and welch on the deal, don't they?
Well, they can move in. It remains to be seen. The one thing they've done is unify all the provinces against them this time. On the Constitution, they divided them, and on energy, they divided them. But when they get into the sphere of gambling and try to compete with the provinces for the spoils, they have put them together. Even Miller in Ontario is upset with the feds this time. They've broken the Queen's Park
Who in Ontario?
axis. Miller, the treasurer.
The treasurer.
He says this is a scandal. You made a deal with us, and it won't do. Even Hadfield has suggested he's not happy.
All right, you're the intellectual, I'm the redneck. Let's get to the morality of gambling. I think it's disgusting.
No, wait a
These
minute.
pools.
Well,
This gambling.
I don't.
It makes us a banana republic, where everybody will be sitting on the street corners chewing their pot and selling their tickets.
Listen, is Britain a banana republic?
Getting there.
Well, if you want to put it that way.
And they don't have anything
Well, first
like
of all,
as many
wait a minute,
lotteries
look,
as we have, and the government doesn't run the lotteries.
I don't bet in any of these things. I have a daughter that does, and the odd time I pay half of hers, so indirectly I'm involved, but she's fascinated by it. People are going to gamble anyway. It doesn't matter whether you or I know it's crazy and that they're going to lose money hand over fist. They're going to gamble, so why shouldn't the government get a piece of it? Rather the government gets it than the kind of characters that run gambling on the side.
But you're all for gambling. In other words,
No, I am not for gambling.
You don't have any decent moral principles at all that gambling is evil and comes from the mouths of the poor.
I am. Now that's exaggerated. I have some sympathy with that, but we'd have to see the data to show that the poor are taken in more than the rich by this.
Any common sense observer who sees who buys tickets who can't afford them.
All right, wait a minute.
People like you with money in the bank don't buy tickets.
I don't have any money in the bank right now. I owe the bank money. Same as most
People who
other
owe money are wealthy.
Oh God, you have a. How much do you owe?
Nothing.
Nothing, and you're wealthy. So
No, I'm not.
Well, I'll trade you incomes and
you're
estates
trying to
right
tell
now.
me this is a goof of the week.
This is the goof of the week.
Another political double cross by the Liberals.
Yes, well, by Ottawa. But now they're going to say, they could say, Clark made the deal, we weren't party to it. But that doesn't matter. It was the federal government that made a deal with the provinces, and now they've gone back on it.
I think it's disgusting and demeaning and immoral, but I don't think it's a goof of the week.
You don't think
What you expect from
All right, there are other goofs around. Trudeau is in the States, and he's really set off a time bomb. Solidarity's in trouble in Poland. There are goofs all over the place. The problem is to pick out which one is the most appropriate for the week. And we don't want to pick on Trudeau every week. It's not fair. He gives us one a week, but we should spread it around.
He deserves the Order of Canada for sitting down there with a little snicker on his face listening to Bob Hope insult him.
Well, all right. Everybody has to do that. That's the way you prove you're a big man. If you're a president of the United States or a prime minister or anything else, you have to put up with that. And Bob Hope's good at it.
I think the goof of the week was Crispo picking the lotteries as the goof of the week.
Give me your goof of the week.
My goof of the week?
Yes. You're going to tell me there isn't one?
I haven't made a mistake in my life.
I want to hear it.
I'll bet you nobody wants to talk about the goof of the week. We'll open the phones and see what happens.
Well, they'll probably be on the morality of it rather than the distastefulness of the government backing off on a deal with the province.
After the break, to Crispo. Go ahead to Crispo.
As far as I'm concerned, the goof of the week is Trudeau going to Korea instead of staying home listening to what the
That's next week.
got to say.
That's this week.
Well, yeah, but it doesn't happen now. It hasn't happened yet.
But that's a goof of the week.
All right, I'll accept that as one possibility.
Go ahead, please.
Hello.
Yes.
Yes, Mr. Crispo. I think the goof of the week is the classic example of that old saw that once tax is in place, it never disappears. I'm referring, of course, to the tax placed by Lalonde on oil to cover the increased cost of imported oil. And now that is not the case anymore. They've changed the name of the tax.
Well, they've changed the name of it, but all that was going to happen was you were going to get a break for a couple of months anyway, and then the new tax was going to come in and take over. So all they've done is...
Even so, Mr. Crispo,
Look, I'm not defending
them.
them.
Be chippy about it. I mean, if it was a couple of months,
Couple of months is a couple
Couple of months, okay.
That's still a better goof of the week than the lotteries. Go ahead,
right.
please.
Hello.
Yeah. Speak up, ma'am.
Hello.
Yes.
Yeah, I think the goof of the week is Trudeau adding more members to his cabinet. With the inflation rate the way it is, and now he's dipping into the taxpayers' pockets more
Good,
than ever.
that's
Adding.
also better than the lotteries.
Well, no, look at that one. They all do that, and I can see. Didn't I say at the beginning? How do you pick the goof of the week?
Well, your local knowledge, lack of knowledge is showing, because now we have Senator Ray Perot commonly called Senator Fogbound by some people.
Well, he's got Senator Austin with him.
Reinforced by Senator Austin.
Well, that just means double trouble from BC.
2 senators.
Yes.
In the cabinet.
Yes, yes, yes.
And no elected
But no, but obviously they didn't think Ray Perot was doing a good job of representing the West, so Austin's going to do it. And of course, you also have Axworthy. You're very lucky in the West.
Axworthy's not a representative from the West.
Well, where's Manitoba?
It's certainly not in the West as
well.
We
Manitoba doesn't want to be in Ontario.
It's in central Canada. Go ahead, please. From Vernon.
Yes, the point was raised that the governments may as well go into gambling better than having
mafia.
Well,
whatever else.
Other people do it.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's ridiculous. What the government has done is bring this disease into every home across the country.
Here, here.
And
well,
I think
you're not going to
just
stop
disgusting.
gambling.
I mean,
you don't have to encourage
you're
it.
Getting a lot of people who shouldn't be spending money on this type of thing because they can't afford it, but they're hooked and they're doing it.
Here, here. Go ahead, please, from Quesnel.
Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
I think the goof of the week is when Mr. Trudeau put the legislature through about the English and the French on the signs. And now in Quebec they have it being illegal to have English in the signs in Quebec.
Well, wait a minute. It was illegal. Now we have a court case to test it. That's what's actually happening down there.
Go ahead, please.
Hi, I'm from, actually came out here from Calgary 4 years ago, and I still call the Albertan the province, or the province the Albertan. And in the province this morning, there's a story of a hard luck crook who should have stayed in Alberta. It's really neat, and I'd like to meet you, Jack, because I met you sort of with a friend, said hello to you at lunch a week or so ago in the Old Bailiff, and my mother came from Glasgow, and you could help me trace my family roots. I'm from Who's Who in Vancouver many years ago.
No, that was your goof of the week with the mother coming from Glasgow. Go ahead, please.
I'd like to say that the goof of the week is Mr. Webster having Mr. Crispo on his program to talk about the lotteries. Mr. Crispo is supposedly paid by SFU, and he spends an awful lot of time on your program. Thank you.
Well, just before we leave that, Jack, I'm glad they think that is the goof of the week. SFU was perfectly aware when I came out here as a visiting professor for a year that I would be doing some work with the Webster show, so nothing's being done behind anybody's back. But if you want to call it the goof of the week, there's so many candidates for this. It's unbelievable.
Just let me say that it's a big improvement for SFU to have any of their faculty recognized on this program at all.
Well, wait a minute. I've told you before, Jack, your compliments do me more harm than good.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah. I'd just like to say two things, one on gambling and then another subject. I work in a mill and that, and I see the guys who walk to the bank, cash their checks, and hand over 100 or 2 to the guys that are doing this illegally in that, And whether or not it's right, I'd rather see the government taking this money away from these people than it being put into everything, whatever, drugs, prostitution, whatever, because that's where it all goes. And the other thing I'd like to ask Mr. Crispo was, last time he was on,
Crisco. He may be a bit loyally,
for
but
people
it's
that were
Crispo.
collecting
No, wait a minute. You can call me.
pension, and
Well, now we've missed his question.
papering their walls with these checks.
Which checks?
And whether we're going to see a time when these people are going to have to prove that they need this money, and the money go to better uses in the Canadian economy and that.
Well, no, but I think that was the point about
What's my timing?
About people getting aid from government who don't need it. I think that's the point he was raising, and I've been hollering about that for years.
John Crispo will try again next week with a better goof of the week. I'll be back after the break. It's just amazing to me how Bill Bennett's image seems to have improved in the last few days, largely because of an attack on Barrett. That Barrett is in some way hiding in the weeds, and he certainly hasn't been very visible. But tomorrow morning on Webster, at 9 a.m. precisely, Davy Barrett. And we'll find out whether he is hiding in the weeds, if the NDP has policies, whether or not he's got, like Joe Clark, a few sharp knives in the back which only hurts when he laughs. But Barrett tomorrow, 9 a.m. precisely.